video, one that I've been looking forward to for I don't even know how long. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into things. So as you can see, we have pretty much everything for the entire Coyote motor laid out right here. I'm going to go ahead and show you everything I've got, kind of give you the breakdown of what's going on, the details behind the motor we're going to be assembling, and just kind of walk you through the process as best I can. And small disclaimer before we get too far into this, I am by no means a professional. I'm just someone that is a hobbyist. That being said, I probably will make mistakes along the way, ones that I don't even know I'm making, but more than likely by the time you see this, it's probably either too late and I figured out that I made a mistake because something bad's happened, or everything's worked out fine. So quick background on the motor here. This is a 2018 Shortblock, and what we're going to be doing essentially is assembling what I've seen people call a Frankenstein Coyote. What makes a Frankenstein Coyote, you're probably asking? Well, that would be a Gen 3 Shortblock. We've got Gen 2 heads, and then we're going to be running Gen 1 timing components because this is going to be going into my 2012 Mustang. So when you run Coyote motors, you have to run cams and timing components based on the generation ECU that you're running. So this is a Gen 1 car. We're keeping the stock ECU. I'm not going full crazy. So that being said, we've got to run Gen 1 cams, Gen 1 timing components, as in the crank sprocket, oil pump gears, things of that nature. If this were a Gen 2 car, we could run Gen 2 cams, timing components, and all that good stuff. But being a Gen 1, we're going to be doing, like I said, this is essentially called the Frankenstein Coyote build. And it's probably because it utilizes parts from pretty much every generation of Coyote Mustang to make this like unnecessary but awesome motor. So I already know some of you guys out there are probably screaming at me because you're thinking and you've read on the internet that there's issues with the Gen 3 block and the Gen 2 heads and the cooling ports not lining up. I'm going to go ahead and look at that when we get to that point, once I pull the gaskets and everything out, like the head gaskets, show you guys what it is exactly that's not lining up necessarily. I've seen at least 3 to 4 people run this setup in, Gen 1 cars, and they're all making like 1,000 horsepower with like a turbo setup. So I know that the first guy to do it, I think it was Manuel Gomez. Jim Costco was the owner of the car. That car was running 8s all day long consistently, and I believe it made like 950 on the dyno on 13 PSI, and they turned it up to like 17 PSI at the track. I do believe that motor eventually blew, but they were probably making like, I don't know, 1,100 horsepower to the wheels on essentially a stock motor. I have no intentions of going that far with this car. My intentions are probably about 800 to 900 wheel. We might go higher than 9 on like a full, set and setup. I don't really know. But time will tell. I am keeping the Paxton supercharger in the car. That's not changing. The only difference in the kit as it sits versus what it's going to be, I'm literally just going to pull off the wastegate and let the blower actually breathe. Could make 13, 14 PSI because I was told that's what the 333 pulley is going to normally make, but I don't really know how it's going to change with the higher compression, better flowing heads, and then the heavier cam. So we'll see. It's going to be a learning curve for everybody. I'm excited to kind of build this and try and target it to the long-term, like longevity of the motor. My intentions are E85, like I said, 8 to 900 wheel, and then have like a conservative 93 tune where I literally just have them pull all the timing out of the tune and run like 93 and maybe make like 600, 700 off the wheel, something like that. So I have like my regular same tune that's already on the car essentially, and then I'll have my race tune to make way more power. So I think that kind of covers all of the background. Hopefully you guys are excited about it like I am, and gonna stay tuned for the long run to kind of see how things work out over time, because I think it's gonna be a pretty good setup. The biggest concern being, well, the coolant passage is not lining up on the heads in the block. Like, is that gonna cause long-term issues? Because it's kind of not really been tested in terms of long-term. Everybody just puts this together and then turns it way up to see like how much they can make before it blows up. I'd rather see how long it can last, and like realistically, is it a good option for people when wanting to go on like a cost-efficient route versus taking your Shortblock and sending it off and spending $5 grand to get it built. Let's kind of run through all of the parts here. As you know, Gen 3 short block. Down here is actually an engine gasket kit. Ford sells it. It's like every gasket in the motor, and I believe that's for the Boss 02. Another thing to note when running 2015 heads, no matter if you go Gen 2 heads or Gen 1 heads on the Gen 3 block, you run the head gaskets that work with those heads. And that's the same whether you do a Gen 2 block or a Gen 3 block. So in here we have our Gen 2 heads. Give you guys a quick peek. All right, there we go. And you can tell it's a Gen 2 head based on the ports and like how they're shaped, which is not really visible right now because it's dark, but you'll see it eventually. Okay, so we have ARP head bolts, main stud kit. We've got brand new lash adjusters, Ford Racing, finger followers, and then I have all the ARP assembly stuff. So this is like the cams, the phasers, the cam cower taps, the ARP crank pulley bolt for the balancer. Then we've got a ignition pulse ring, pilot bearing. These are dowel pins for the top of the block to line the heads up on. We obviously have our cams, brand new cam filters, as well as primary and secondary timing chain tensioners. We do have the JPC billet timing chain guides and tensioners, as well as MMR, the heavy duty like secondary chains. Being that I have the cams, I figured that would be a good thing to have. ATI super damper balancer, and it does include the option for like the air conditioning still. I've got a Gen 2 oil filter adapter because you do still need to run the oil filter adapter on the Gen 3 block for a Gen 1 car. And this is the MMR oil pan as well as high flow pickup tube. So it's got like a bigger opening in the bottom so that it doesn't restrict oil flow. And then we do have a brand new oil pump because the Gen 3 block comes with a different type of oil pump and pickup tube. So, and then we have the boundary, oil pump gears, and crank sprocket. And then last but not least, this little piece from MMR. This is an adapter for the ARP main stud kit for the oil pump pickup tube, because you're supposed to either like modify your one with like a machining thing, and I was like, nah, I'm gonna keep it simple, just pick up the part. All right, so that's everything. So let's get into it. A couple things to note before we get too far into everything. When I got the short block, as you can see on the screen right now, there was some surface rust that was kind of in the cylinder walls. And I did reach out and get a couple questions answered. So I was told just pick up a Scotch-Brite pad and then some WD-40, spray that in, kind of just go across with the Scotch-Brite pad, and then that'll clean the surface of the cylinder walls right up, which you can now see are all rust-free. So that was one of the first things I did kind of off camera before we even get started with everything, just to make sure everything was clean and good to go. Now I do want to real quick point out the ARP main stud kit. It highly recommends that you bolt down everything and then align, hone, and bore the like main line of the block where like the crankshaft sits. Main reason being that, you know, when building a motor, you want to make sure all that's obviously as circular as possible and near perfect as you can get it. Biggest thing that I'm gonna, I guess, make a disclaimer on here, being that this is a brand new short block, literally never been run before, I'm going to swap out all the main studs and see and kind of make a measurement to determine whether or not I see a difference in resistance of the rotating assembly, because I'd rather not have to fully disassemble the whole block, just, you know, to do that. But in the event that I do see a variation, I will do that. So what I went ahead and did was I picked up a high-end torque wrench, and it's like a digital torque wrench, and I made a measurement at like the top dead center. So when the keyway is at 12 o'clock as well as at 6 o'clock, that's where I kind of found the most resistance in the rotating assembly, because it's like the top of the swing of the piston. So I made a measurement and I saw anywhere from about 180 to 190 inch-pound of resistance. So now that I have that, I kind of look at that and I'm like, all right, well, you know, add another 5 on each end, and that's kind of where I want my resistance to measure. Ideally, I want the resistance to be the same after I swap out the main stud kit. There's a possibility that swapping all that stuff out will change the resistance of the rotating assembly, because maybe it's a stronger clamping force or whatever. So we're going to swap it all out, make a measurement, and go from there. And so for anyone interested, this 2018 short block, when you buy the factory short block, actually comes with a ton of stuff. It has the oil pan, it's got the oil filter relocation kit, It's got a rear main seal intact. Obviously the rotating assembly is all there, and it even has the front oil pump as well as like the pickup tube, because it's kind of part of how the whole composite oil pan assembly works. But again, being that this is going to be going in a Gen 1 car, we're going to pull all this stuff off. So in the event that you see this and you're in the market for, 2018 brand new oil pump, pan and pickup tube, by all means let me know, as well as the filter relocation piece. All the bolts are off, should pop right off. Yep, look at that. There you go. So on the 2018s, the oil pump is actually like, this pickup tube is like molded into the plastic, so it's a whole unison piece thing. And then they have this stupid oil drain. It's like a little plastic composite piece versus like an actual metal bolt, which I mean, I guess works, but usually you have to replace these after a couple uses anyways, so I don't know, kind of silly. Anyways, here we go, all off. Next step is remove the oil pump. Oil pump just slides off. And I'm going to go ahead and pull off this filter relocation too. So this is the 2015 oil filter relocation piece versus the 2018. The biggest thing I'm noticing here is the 2018 has like this extra port of some sort, probably for, I don't know, the direct injection or whatever, but there's like a spring inside there that probably opens up under pressure, and this doesn't have any of that. Outside of that, biggest thing to note in terms of difference up top, this 18 one has like this extra passage, whereas this is not really a passage at all. It's just kind of a space that was sort of opened up for whatever reason. And then the gaskets are different, as well as the 18 has an extra bolt hole right there. I'm gonna go ahead and loosen the main cap bolts now. There's a certain torque sequence, and when uninstalling you should reverse it. So I'm gonna reverse the Ford service manual torque sequence. So it usually is 1, 2, starting from the outside going on the inside. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then inside 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Just realized before I can pull all the main caps off, I actually have to pull off the rear main seal here, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Okay, so in an effort to minimize some of the work, what I've done is loosened the rear main seal, but I haven't actually removed it, just so that I don't have to replace all the silicone gasket. Now someone's probably freaking out right now, but this has literally never been run before, so as long as the silicone is still intact, which it is, I feel like that's probably still a good seal. So we're gonna go ahead and start pulling these main caps. Gonna go ahead and admit mistake number one. I forgot to remove the side bolts first, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that before I continue any further with the main caps, which luckily I didn't break the outside, so they should still be held in just as strong. Okay, back to the main cap bolts. So now we have all of the main studs out. We can go ahead and start swapping in the ARP studs. So I've got all the main studs laid out here. This is going to be the outer edge. This is going to be the inner edge. This is the oil pickup tube one, as well as the MMR spacer and bolt that screws into the end of it, plus the washers and nuts all laid out for it as well, lubricant, and then side main bolts. So we're going to go ahead and start installing this on the block. So I have the outer main studs here. I'm just going to start lubing up the threads as I go to thread them in, starting off just hand tight on the bottom stud. just going across each of these and making sure that they're actually all the way to the bottom. So it says finger tight or whatever, but you know, with the gloves on, my fingers are probably slipping on some of them, which I just proved because there was a couple more threads left to tighten down. So I'm just kind of snugging it up. That's about it in terms of like the Allen wrench, so don't freak out. So now that all the studs are in, I've got them snugged up with the Allen keys, just kind of make sure they're, you know, bottomed out, not tightened or torqued or anything, just bottomed out. Now I'm going to go ahead and start putting on the washers and nuts, just finger tighten those, and then we'll go into the torquing procedure. It's not like you'll ever see this again.
No, I hope not.
Yeah, hopefully. Thank you. Alright, I got assembly lube on all the different studs and the washers, so now when we go to torque everything, we should have really good, precise measurements. Alright, so got my digital torque wrench here. We're going to go ahead and start torquing down all of the main studs. So you're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, starting with the outer edge, and then move on to the inside. Again, same pattern, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We start with 20 foot-pounds. Do all of them to 20 foot-pounds. Bump up the torque for 45 foot-pounds. Alright, 45 foot-pounds, and then same pattern, outer and then inner. Okay, last sequence, we're going 80 foot-pounds on the inner rotation. All torqued. I had to get a little creative there at the end on how I was holding the torque wrench, because 80 foot-pounds isn't like a crazy amount, but it's a little difficult when the engine stand keeps moving around. Now we're going to do the side bolts, same pattern essentially. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We're going to go ahead and torque down these side bolts here. Again, 45 foot-pounds. So when I make these torques, I want to be as slow and smooth in movement of the wrench as possible. So that way it's nice and accurate. Alright, that's that. Now before I can put the oil pickup tube and spacer thingy back on, I need to actually put on the oil pump itself, just because I want to make sure that I'm lining it up correctly when it comes to bolting all that stuff down. And so for that, we do have the brand new Boundary oil pump gears, as well as a brand new factory oil pump. I believe the oil pump is the exact same for the 11 through 17 Coyotes. So we're going to go ahead and swap these gears out, and that way we can bolt the pump back onto the motor. So these are all just Torx 30 bits, and then loosen all those, and then this comes right out. And I'm just going to pull these out. Brand new oil pump gears. But we are not trying to mess around with these. Maybe we'll do the drop test at some point. That'd be kind of cool. Alright, grab the new ones, drop them in. We're going to have freshy fresh, baby. And then I believe you want the words facing the front. So, it'll be downward in this case. This turns nice and freely, but we'll double check that once it's tightened back down. probably not the correct way to do that, but I use very precise ugga-duggas, okay? So, relax. Alright, so now we'll go ahead and put the oil pump back on. It should slide back on. No big deal. You're gonna go ahead and torque down the oil pump bolts. It is 89 inch-pounds for the two smaller ones, and then 177 for the bigger one. I think this one's supposed to be the last one you do, but I don't think it's that big of a deal, and I already have this torque wrench set, so whatever. 177. Go to 89. foot-pound. 89. That's the last one. There we go. And then lastly, you tighten down an additional couple degrees for each one. 45 degrees on these smaller ones. 75 degrees on this one. And then lastly, 60 degrees. Oil pump is all on. I've got the spacer here for the oil pickup tube. The oil pan's about to go on, but before I do that, I have to clean up some of this gasket. But before I do that, I need to finish torquing down the rear main seal cover again. And these bolts are all torqued to 89 inch-pounds and then another 45 degrees. Alright, lastly another 45 degrees each based on the same sequence. Alright, that's that. Alright, so had to do a little bit of manipulation on the oil pickup tube here. Took some pliers, kind of stretched it or whatever, and now it's in good position. I did clean up the silicone gasket on the back here. These are not torqued down, but snugged down. Actually, I'll torque those real quick. So these are both tightened to 89 inch-pounds. And then an additional 45 degrees. And this is tightened to 20 foot-pounds, I believe it's like. Yep, 20 foot-pounds on this, according to ARP's specs. Alright, we're now all torqued down and we can go ahead and start working on reinstalling the oil pan. Doing a little test fit on the oil pan. Alright, so without the gasket, they're both the same distance, so this gasket should provide however much that is, probably 1/8 of an inch, so just enough clearance that the pump's not sucking on the pan, it's sucking, you know, actual oil. We're about ready to install the oil pan real quick, and before we do that, we need to put black silicone gasket maker on the back here where the timing cover, or the rear main seal meets the block and the oil pan gasket. You want to seal up that little passage right there. Alright, now we have the gasket maker down. I'm going to be quick. Go ahead and put the new oil pan on. Trying to not move the gasket or oil pan gasket around too much, just to kind of keep the silicone from getting mushed. Alright, got a bunch of these bolts. As per usual, there's a torque sequence. 1, 2, 3 back is the first one. 18 inch-pounds is what they said to start with. I'm just going to kind of snug it up. assume that I will already met the 18 inch-pound. We're gonna go right into 89 inch-pound. And last step in the torque sequence is 45 degrees. Alright, that is it. Oil pan is on. I can reinstall the relocation bracket for the oil pan, for the oil filter, and that's pretty much it for the Shortblock. Alright, so each of these bolts are tightened down to 177 inch-pounds and then 60 degrees more. And the last little piece is the oil filter adapter. And then this is torqued to 43 foot-pounds, but I gotta get the right size thingy, so I'm actually gonna run to the store tomorrow and pick up the right tools. With that, we are done with the assembly on the Shortblock. So before I'm gonna really call it a done deal, I'm gonna measure the resistance again on the crankshaft. So this could all be for naught, depending on what kind of readings I get. So we're hoping to get around 180 to 190 inch-pound in terms of the peak resistance at like 12 and 6 o'clock. So we have our handy-dandy little crankshaft turning socket. I'm gonna set it to 195 inch-pound. So if we ever peak that, it'll kind of yell at us. I'm going to throw a little bit of lubricant on the cylinder walls just because there was some last time, just to make sure that everything is more or less equal. Okay, I've got a couple of rotations in, and I'm getting consistent measurements right about 180. Well, that made me a liar. With the occasional outlier. Right about 12 and 6 o'clock are the most like resistant points, so that's where I've been doing my measurements. 179. 184. I'd say I'm pretty happy with those numbers. I think that this is pretty much the same specs as the factory block was set up. So that being said, we can continue moving forward in the build without taking it to a machine shop. It's probably going to upset some people, but again, this is intended to be kind of like your budget build, you know, that anybody can do at their home garage with a little bit of technical know-how. Alright guys, so I think that's going to wrap up this episode of the motor build. The Shortblock is all done and ready to go. It's got a new oil pan, got new main studs, new oil pump and pump gears, pickup tube, and a fresh oil pump gasket, all ready to go, as well as this oil filter relocation bracket. And my glove's about had enough, so I think that's going to do it for this video. Hopefully it's not too terribly long. I apologize if it is. I know we kind of had that intro and breakdown of everything that we're going to be doing, but from here, it should be smooth sailing when it comes to assembling the motor, and I'm looking forward to kind of sharing each of those steps of the way with you guys. So hopefully you all enjoyed this video series. Definitely hit the thumbs up button if you do, and feel free to subscribe to the channel if you're new here and would like to stay tuned for the content. Obviously, things are going to be getting pretty exciting, and I'm sure you're going to want to stay tuned for the outcome of this bad boy. Peace out. I'll catch you in the next one.